Hi, welcome to another episode of the PlaceOS podcast. Today we talk to David from Cisco Meraki. He is the product manager of the IoT range of sensors and anything IoT related to Cisco Meraki. So we talk about sensors, we talk about his career progression into IoT, an area I find quite interesting because it's not a clear pathway, so everyone gets into it in different ways. And we touch on industry verticals and where sensors can be applied to improve user experience or collect data. Hi, David. So your role is IoT for Cisco Meraki. But what sort of led you into IoT specifically?
Yeah, well, first off, Jon Sabrina, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the PlaceOS podcast here. What led me into IoT specifically? So it actually dates back to graduate school for me. So I actually did a graduate program at Carnegie Mellon University in the United States in Pennsylvania. And one of the courses we had was called Designing for the Internet of Things, where that was really my first introduction to IoT. And it was programming for non-programmers, but it was really a focus on designing the experiences. What kind of outcomes are people looking for with IoT technologies? And I was absolutely fascinated by the class. I created this really cool connected ski glove that it could detect a fall and it could send your GPS coordinates to ski patrol to come find you and save you and stuff. And
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a really exciting opportunity. And then I ended up teaching the class, actually. So they brought me back as an adjunct professor, and I got to teach it for a semester to undergraduate students. And then
it's interesting that it's actually very rare that people discover IoT at university. It's usually a lot more accidental than that, something that happens after uni and just fall into it. But I actually had a similar experience when I was studying at the Faculty of Architecture at Sydney University. I was working on a project where we had to disrupt the interface, and our project was to remove what we ended up doing was remove all the white and black notes from a physical piano and install solenoids in each string of the piano and programmed a web camera to be the input to the piano. So you'd have to relearn to the interface of a piano. And that sort of challenging of the interface is something I think got me into what we do in smart buildings. And I reflect on that all the time, actually.
Yeah. I was just thinking as well, it's very rare that they have a dedicated course for IoT or IoT related topics. And so was that something specific to the uni, and is that a part of the reason why you selected that uni?
So the actual program that I took, it was called Integrated Innovation for Products and Services. So it was trying to be on the cutting edge of technology and looking at different innovation philosophies and technologies to solve really difficult and complex problems. And so IoT, being a cutting edge technology, really fit nicely into the program because a lot of the solutions could leverage, some of these smarts and technologies to deliver some of those outcomes that customers and businesses are looking for.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And did that lead you to working directly for Cisco, or was there anything in between before you ended up in your current role?
Yeah, so actually, after I left the university and the teaching role, I took a job with a company called Phoenix Contact, who makes hardware for industrial automation. And I was I was working in product marketing on some more of their higher tech IoT products. So we had a couple of cellular routers that technicians could use to remote log into their equipment so that they could do program updates, firmware updates, and troubleshoot issues all over the internet. And then we also had a cloud platform where you could actually send industrial control data up to the cloud where you can store it, you can analyze it, you can visualize it, and ultimately try to look for some of the trends going on with your equipment. Try to look for some of the things like, is my motor starting to overheat? And maybe that's a sign that it's starting to fail. And so that's really, I spent 2.5, almost 3 years with Phoenix Contact, and that's really where I got a lot of the experience hands-on with IoT in a more commercial setting, working with actual customers, deploying some of these technologies to help solve their business problems.
What you're saying is actually quite interesting, like to go from university doing innovation and product, which led to IoT, and then finding roles that specifically in that. I mean, a lot of these jobs didn't exist 10 years ago, right? And it's it's great to see like a pathway that people can take today, which ultimately led you to manage the product line of IoT sensors for Meraki. Do you think a lot of that, your progression, your career progression, has been based on your location? Does it happen to be a IoT hub there in Elizabethtown where you are, or is it just maybe not, or what are your thoughts on that?
No, actually, I don't think location has really any part of this necessarily. I think for me, it was really just gravitating towards the technology and the outcomes it can deliver. And with the Internet of Things, you can do it anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the beauties of the internet is you can have connectivity to, just about anything, anywhere, any way that you want. And so that's a trend we're seeing right now with the whole hybrid workforce and the remote workforce is that companies are looking for talent anywhere nowadays because they don't necessarily want to be restricted to a geographic location necessarily.
And I think that's both. That's great for both the employer and the employee because when you're not just hiring in major cities like New York City, for example, the rates can be lower. It's a cheaper. Everything's cheaper and it scales both ways. And so we do a lot of work with Cisco, and I've actually noticed that even within the Meraki team that we work with, no one seems to be in the same city. So every meeting we have, it's with I'm always looking up what city they're in so I can get a sense of their geography.
Yeah, for sure. And Cisco, being an IT company, right, we provide a lot of solutions to enable these remote working. So I guess you could say we're eating our own dog food in a sense by letting our employees work wherever is comfortable for them and makes sense, the most sense for them.
Yeah, and I think this then naturally starts to decentralize. There's no head office in that case, and there's no there's more opportunity for everyone because you don't have to be head office to network with the right people. So with your role now with Meraki IoT the sensors, so there's a current lineup of sensors, and is it safe to say that right now they're sort of focused on data center monitoring and operations, or are you seeing interesting user cases in other areas?
Yeah, great question. So the IoT sensors, really, the portfolio started at Meraki to target those data centers, those network closets. And when you think about the hardware that we make, it actually makes a lot of sense. So our SD-WAN appliances, our switches, our access points, a lot of that equipment is absolutely critical for keeping businesses operational, right? If they lose connectivity, that can take down a POS system and a retailer can no longer transact with their customers, just as one example, right? And so the sensors was a way to provide remote visibility into those environments where they store a lot of that networking equipment. A lot of those rooms, right? They can be subject to temperature issues. If it's an older building, maybe water can get into there, or the HVAC system doesn't properly cool the equipment. Sometimes, people just randomly walk into IT closets and they start unplugging cables. So there's an angle of vandalism and tampering. And so really it was a natural extension of the portfolio to try to provide an additional visibility into those spaces so that IT departments don't have to worry about, is my network closet starting to overheat? They can focus on other value-added tasks to keep their business operational, knowing that a lot of their equipment is going to be safe and operating effectively. And so that's really where it got its start. But then we've been seeing a lot of exciting new use cases emerge. If we look specifically in those networking environments, the data centers specifically, one really exciting use case that we've seen is that the sensor data can actually help organizations become more sustainable. So, for example, inside data centers and big server rooms, it requires a lot of energy to run the HVAC systems that are used to cool all of the equipment inside there. And a lot of times, they're not being cooled very efficiently. Many times it was set up and they're just using kind of historical knowledge to set the temperature in the room, or maybe the airflow isn't circulating appropriately. And what we found is that if you actually put the sensors in specific locations, and you leverage some best practices like hot out containment systems, leverage ASHRAE standards to know what temperature and humidity ranges the air should be in, you can actually decrease your overall energy consumption inside these environments. And we've seen actually some customers, they've decreased their energy consumption by 20 to 50%, which across all of their locations globally can translate to millions of dollars saved annually and millions of tons of CO2 saved. So that ultimately saving them money and helping create a greener footprint for their company.
Well, yeah, I think that concept's quite important across the whole building, not just the data center and the comms cupboard, but just the idea of not just running based on scheduled information or historic data, using real-time data to trigger actions based on what's actually happening. And that, that's great for efficiencies, energy consumption, but also better user experience as well, because you can trigger actions based on what needs to happen right now, not based on what we think is going to happen. So in that case, when companies are saving, what did you say, that 20 to 30% energy reduction, is that because these spaces that you've started with these sensors are responsible for so much energy consumption? Is that the thinking there?
No. So the way that they're saving energy is that they're not cooling the data center as cold as they necessarily need to. So they can actually increase the temperature. They can pull in air from the outside, mix it with an economizer rather than turning on their actual HVAC system. But they need that sensor data to validate that the air that they're flowing through their environment is within the adequate temperature and humidity ranges to safely and effectively operate that equipment without decreasing reliability or longevity.
Yeah.
And is the reason that it's an added value for the customer to deploy a Meraki sensor because those data points don't already exist somewhere in that facility? I guess maybe that's the nature of a data center where it's not a corporate office where they're monitoring lots of different things for people to occupy that space. So I could see that. Is that, I guess, the key reason why deploying that additional sensor would make sense?
Yeah, there's a couple reasons. For one, like you said, that the environment might not have sensors already in place, or a lot of legacy sensors, they either provide false alarms or maybe not the best readings. And so just having a more modern solution can sometimes just provide more insightful information. But I think one of the real value adders of Meraki, when you look at a global enterprise who has multiple locations and they want to deploy these sensors across all of them, is the fact that all of our products are cloud managed. And the sensors, it's really, you push one button, it connects to one of our MR or MV gateways, and the deployment is less than 5 minutes. And they're all battery powered, so you can really deploy them and forget about them for up to 5 years. And so for a couple of these reasons, it makes it really easy to scale this out to multiple locations quickly and effectively. And then once they are deployed, they're all managed on the cloud. So you have visibility to those sensors. If there's ever kind of any configurations or anything, updates that need to be done, you can do that at mass or at scale, leveraging the cloud.
Yeah, that's interesting because I guess in a corporate world where we operate a lot of the time, there might be a new fit out every 5 to 10 years. There's always new technology going into the buildings, but in these data centers, they might be located really remotely, or they might have had that same infrastructure there for 20 years. And who's to say that temperature sensor that might exist on the BMS network or might not isn't offline or recording something inaccurately. So that makes a lot of sense.
The other part of this is it's often, so with our workplace projects, it's often hard for that workplace tenancy to get access to building data. So it's easier in many cases to just roll out their own sensor rather than connecting to the air conditioning unit that in turn has a sensor connected to it to do temperature and humidity. If that's available over Meraki and Meraki's already running as their Wi-Fi, then it's an easy option for them. And I guess that's sort of been our selfish needs for the sensors, the IoT products from Meraki, is we're thinking, well, how do we use this in across all of the industries we work in? Universities and workplace and hospitals, and I imagine there's direct user cases with the existing lineup and maybe future products coming out under the IoT umbrella that will continue to help us achieve those goals.
Yeah, definitely. The universities and education is actually a pretty interesting use case because a lot of times they have very distributed campuses, right? Multiple buildings. They have multiple HVAC systems, BMS systems, whatever, and they need to be able to monitor all of the equipment that is inside those facilities. And a lot of times they are older buildings, right? Universities have very historic buildings, and sometimes it's even hard to update or renovate them. And so just having something that can be easily deployed without having to do major renovations inside of a facility like that, it can actually be very beneficial for sure.
Yeah, university is interesting. They have buildings from the 1800s sometimes, then every decade going on, and it's usually those buildings that are like from the 70s and the 80s that no one likes and are trying to upgrade. But there's so much legacy to deal with, and technology is a layer that sits on top of this built environment. So yeah, that's universities are one of our focus points right now, because we see it as a stepping stone to smart cities, because a campus is like a mini city, and it's easier to work within a city because it's one stakeholder and it's a controlled environment, usually standardized network across the whole campus. So at least we have a good starting point to then add experiences on top. But we see that as a way to, can we have a standard practice when it comes to tracking people, identifying people, and then triggering actions that we can then take to cities or other similar large sprawl organizations like amusement parks and anyone else that is campus-based.
Yeah, definitely. And another interesting aspect about education as it pertains to sensors, I don't know if this applies to all schools, but I have heard from one university that they're actually regarded as a financial institution because of all the financial records that they keep and the student aid that they provide. And as a result, they're actually required by their insurance company to have environmental sensors inside of their server rooms and network closets because of the critical information that they keep. So for some universities, it's actually critical for them to monitor some of this equipment because of what could go wrong if that information is ever unavailable.
Yeah, and I guess that one of the sensors in particular is quite important for that, the water leaking sensor. And you actually shared an article with me once previously about just the cost benefit of that alone, because it's with insurance as well. So the insurance company saving money on if there's water leakage sensors, and I imagine that could be applied to any space. There's probably many critical spaces where you don't want water to leak, so that's an easy one to think of beyond the data center or the comms cupboard.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, think about any commercial building. If you have a water leak on one of the upper floors, chances are it can ruin things underneath it. Water always wants to run downhill. And so there's actually studies out there that show that it can cost an organization upwards of $1 million, or, cost an insurance company upwards of $1 million if the water actually does that much damage to that facility. And then just thinking about tying it back to some of the sustainability that we're talking about, that's going to lead to electronic waste. You're obviously wasting water, which has been cleaned or purified or what have you. So just the overall impact that, just a little bit of water can cause is actually very, very significant.
Yeah, and even the long-term health because of mold that grows after any water leak.
So, David, you've spoken a little bit around market verticals like data centers, education, a little bit about commercial. What other market verticals are you seeing opportunity for these sensors? Do you guys operate much in the industrial space?
So when we look at the industrial space, we've had a couple customers who are using Meraki sensors, cameras, other products For example, I know one customer is using our cameras and some really cool like computer vision algorithms to determine product quality. And then another customer, they're using our temperature humidity sensor for product quality as well. Different customers, different use cases, but it is occurring a little bit here and there. However, when we look at pure industrial use cases, typically those environments are subject to extreme temperature ranges, vibration, explosion hazard. There's a lot that really goes into industrial, and so the Meraki sensors are really not designed for those environments specifically. They're more so designed for the carpeted IT spaces. Mm-hmm. Now, with that said, our partners within Cisco, have another portfolio of sensors that they call the industrial asset vision sensors that are designed for those industrial environments. So they have a very wide range of sensors, everything from temperature sensors, motion sensors, proximity sensors, that can all be used inside those industrial spaces and for those different types of applications.
Okay.
And how do these internal departments work together? So would that come back into a Meraki network? Is there a gateway in between?
So the Cisco industrial asset vision sensors, they currently work kind of independent of the Meraki sensors today. That's just the way that the architecture was designed. They actually use LoRaWAN as their technology or communication protocol. So they have a LoRaWAN gateway that those sensors connect to, and then they get their data up to the cloud for kind of monitoring and visualization purposes. Our sensors, they connect directly to the Meraki cameras and access points over Bluetooth. So we found that inside the IT spaces where the sensors were really first targeted at, and a lot of the different applications, that generally they're going to be within Bluetooth range of a camera and access point. So it really made a lot of sense to leverage that protocol. Whereas in the industrial space, if you think about an oil and gas company and you have well pads that are, a couple miles apart or however far, LoRaWAN made a lot more sense because it can actually travel a lot further.
Yeah, and I guess this is one of the benefits of being part of a Cisco portfolio is you pretty much have an answer to every solution, and you can bring in the right teams. And even in Meraki, like you touched on the camera being a sensor, and that's quite important to cross-reference. The way we use that is we use the camera mostly for people counting, and that's a way to cross-reference how many people are in a space with what's happening in that space. So the sensor data can tell us information. The people counting can tell us real-time usage, and together that's essentially utilization. So do you see the camera as an IoT device? Is that how you're thinking about it internally?
Yeah, definitely. So just internally, the way that our team is structured, we look at IoT as cameras and sensors. Yeah. And you're 100% spot on in the fact that when you look at the camera and the sensors together, you get that extra validation. And so I know one exciting use case that a retail customer is deploying right now. So at a lot of their different locations, their branch locations, they have a door where shipments will arrive, right? And they feel like that they're losing product during some of these shipments. And so they have one of the door open and close sensors right on the entryway. Then they have a camera also pointed there that is looking at the carts as well. It's looking at the doorway and the carts. And so they can combine data from A, is there a delivery scheduled? B, has the door been opened? C, does the cart have product on it? And when they combine all of this, they can start to eliminate false alarms and only be alerted if that there's suspicious activity in the vicinity. So they can continuously monitor it, but not have to, continuously check every time that a delivery has occurred. They can only check to see in certain instances when product might appear to have been missing.
we have a similar conversation when talking around different workplace experiences as well, where there's usually no one technology that's going to give you a really holistic view or a complete answer to a problem. An example that we have this similar issue with is desk booking or desk availability, where people want to know who's in the desk, is the desk being occupied, who's booked the desk, is that the same person who's occupying the desk? And there's not one sensor or one camera that's going to be able to identify all of that information. You might need a PIR sensor to identify if there's presence, and then you might need a camera to verify that it's an actual desk being occupied, and then you might need swipe card access or something else to verify who that actual person is that's occupying that space. So it's usually a conglomerate of a number of different things that actually solve problems like that.
And stacking up that data, just paints a better picture. And you can pick and choose the technology for the space as well. So you can use Wi-Fi triangulation for counting people in one space, use a camera for counting people in another space, use the PIR sensor when it needs to be at a desk level of counting. And then you don't need the sort of the high barrier to entry if it's not necessary. So if you only need like a holistic counting in one particular area, then you can just use Wi-Fi. But if another area needs more specific granular tracking, then use the technology only for that space, and that saves money and complexity of rollout. And that's what we like about Meraki, is we can stack up all of these different things. We could just use Wi-Fi, we could just use sensors, we can use both in combination, or we can add a camera when we need to.
Yeah, exactly. You can keep it simple whenever you need to, or you can stack up the technologies for various use cases. 100%.
And we're even finding, that not always just thinking about the problem with technology. There's also manual processes we can introduce to know where people are, such as a QR code check-in. And that's more relevant today than it's ever been, because people, particularly in this market in Australia and our neighbors in Southeast Asia, QR codes are just part of the check-in process for COVID. So any cafe you go to and anywhere you go, you have to scan a QR code, basically. So we're all being trained how to use QR codes. So it's something we're seeing a lot of in our local projects, and that's a good starting point. I mean, and it's very detailed information, so we know exactly who someone is and where they are because they've scanned something and told us who they are. And then technology can maybe help paint the picture across their entire journey, not just that check-in point.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that's one of the exciting things about our access points is like the various splash pages that they can deliver, and then the data and information you can get from those customers whenever they go to a retail environment, or if they access guest Wi-Fi at a corporate office or whatever it might be. And then you can really understand what do they care about. You can use some of the video analytics or the door sensors or whatever it might be to understand how are they traversing through your facility. What do they need? Is there times where it gets busier than normal? And if so, what can we do to improve that experience? Do we need to turn on or off the HVAC system? Do we need to increase ventilation in the facility to improve the air quality? What are some things we can do to really improve that experience for the guests?
Yeah. So just wrapping up, I think something I've noticed about Cisco since COVID hit in let's say March 2020 is that product development's been quite rapid. Things are being released a lot faster. Is there anything you can comment on that with Meraki IoT? Is your roadmap looking like more releases more quickly than you ever done before?
Yeah, so really good question. I can't necessarily speak about any new products that are coming down the road. However, one thing I will say is that the Meraki sensors were only launched a year ago. We've already released a fourth sensor, which was for cold storage monitoring last June. And we really designed the sensors to be a scalable platform. So we are trying to rapidly expand the portfolio and address some new and exciting use cases. So we really at Meraki care about simplifying technology for our customers so that we can really help them solve their problems. So we're really trying to look at what are some of those major problems that our customers are facing today, because you can't really just go out and sell IoT. right? If I want to go and position IoT to somebody, they're not going to know what I'm talking about. So we're looking at delivering those outcomes. And so we started with really trying to look at business resiliency and protecting investments of those business critical equipment. We expanded into cold storage monitoring. But really, that's just the beginning. I know that the product development team is hard at work trying to come out with some new ideas to address some new and creative use cases.
And how do they? What inputs are they taking to sort of feed their roadmap? Is that just being out there with customers and partners, just coming up with their own ideas? Is there sort of a philosophy they follow?
Yeah, I think some of it is looking at market trends, obviously. Yeah. So where is investment going? What kind of sensors are coming up? But then I think the biggest part of it is collaborating with Meraki partners like yourself, or directly with the customers, and trying to sit down with them and understand, what problems are you facing today? And then take that information and try to figure out, well, what can we deliver from a technology standpoint that might help you solve that problem?
Yeah, great. Thanks for your time, David. And we definitely look forward to all the new sensors that are going to come out, and hopefully we'll be one of the first companies integrating with them. So thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.